Welcome to the Seniors in Focus podcast presented by the Seniors Services Society of BC. Each month, we get together to shine a light on issues that matter to today's seniors. I'm your host, Carolyn Jack. I'm a senior myself and someone who has spent some time taking care of seniors. Thank you for joining us today. Today's episode is about loneliness. Have you ever felt lonely? Maybe you have few social connections with family, friends, or your community. If so, you're not alone. A 2025 study from the National Institute on Aging surveyed Canadians 50 years and older and found that 57% have experienced loneliness and 43% are at risk of social isolation. This can be more serious than you may realize. Research says loneliness can have negative impacts on physical and mental health, quality of life, and even lead to the mistreatment of seniors. I'm joined today by Indira Riadi, who is a specialist in healthy aging at the United Way of BC, and Kate Ludlam, Executive Director of the Langley Senior Resource Society. Welcome to you both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. I'd like to begin from hearing from both of you. What do you think is the most misunderstood thing about loneliness in seniors? Indy, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here, Carolyn. I think that the most misunderstood part of this is that the fact of social isolation and loneliness to be the same thing, when in reality it is not. Loneliness refers to more of the quality. So one can be lonely without being socially isolated. And it's the same. One can be socially isolated but not feeling lonely. Social isolation is more sort of the amount of people, I guess, around you. If you are living in multi-generational households, for example, then you would not necessarily be socially isolated, but you can still feel lonely, for example, if you are the only senior in the household, right? So that is probably one of the most misunderstood part.
I know we're going to dig into that a little more later. I want to come over to you, Kate. Kate, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about seniors and loneliness?
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. I would just to add to Indira's comments. I think perhaps people may feel at this stage in life they're surrounded by friends and family, so you might not think of seniors being lonely. But we certainly see that a lot, and it can take a lot of courage for someone at this stage in life to step out and try and forge a new friendship or put themselves in a situation where they're engaging with others if that's not their comfort zone. So I think there is a misconception that seniors are surrounded by friends and family. They've had a lifetime of forging these relationships, and that's not always the case.
Okay, let's dig into this misunderstood topic and see if we can shed a little more light on it. Indy, I'm wondering if we could look a little more at loneliness versus social isolation. Can you tell me a little more? Is one, if you will, more serious than the other? Is one what's the difference there that sort of that we should be concerned about?
Concerning about both, I'd say is important. I think loneliness refers to the feeling, and so that I think loneliness impacts one's mental well-being more and the ability of someone to sort of reach out to other people because it's so internalized and it's more personal, I guess, to someone if they do feel lonely. It feels like there's an external factor that prevents you from connecting with someone, right? Whereas I think with social isolation, someone can choose to be isolated. Like someone can want to live by themselves and not feel lonely just because that's just how they prefer to live. And it's important to give people agency on their own lives, of course. And so, it's important to ask whether they want to. This is a preference for them to live by themselves, for example. And in terms of the importance piece, I do believe that loneliness needs to be tackled first and foremost in terms of, if one or the other, I guess. Social isolation is important to tackle because it affects people's uh, responses to emergency, I want to say. If no one's there around you, and if you've fallen or, something has happened, no one is able to, get help, right? Or see that you are struggling or whatever. And so there's that emergency portion of being socially isolated. But in terms of loneliness, like I said, you can be surrounded by everyone, by people, but still feel that you don't belong. And that's harder to tackle, I think.
India, I'm wondering, are we seeing more loneliness and social isolation? Is that something that's more of a phenomenon than it used to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think after COVID-19, a lot of that topic of social isolation and loneliness have surfaced, and we are seeing a lot more people saying that they're lonely. But I also think that's a good thing that people are now speaking out about it, and this is a topic of conversation. Like, we're talking about it right now, right? It gives awareness, and people can look within themselves, like, oh, am I lonely? Is this why I'm feeling this way? So yes, we see more, but it also could be the cause of people speaking out.
And what's driving that? If we're seeing more
Of people speaking out, I think there's.
but what's driving the higher levels of loneliness and social isolation, you think?
Oh, I see. I guess from my perspective, it is. I think what people don't really think about is financial security, and if a senior or anybody really is facing a lot of financial hardships, there could be, barely any time left to reach out to someone. For example, if you are living in, more rural, remote areas, then transportation is difficult, right? You might not have internet. You might not have a smartphone to do Zoom calls and check-ins with someone. You then might not have the ability to find out what is available around you to tackle these issues. And so digital, I guess, progression of the world is both a negative and a positive. But, for those who are not tech savvy, for example, it could feel really, really, really lonely, right? So.
Yeah. Kate, I want to bring you in. You're seeing a lot of seniors every day at your center. Do you think the people you're seeing, are they there in part because they recognize the need for more social contact? What do you think? Are seniors that you're seeing aware of this, see it as a problem, and they're addressing it, or not so much?
Yeah, I would echo Indira. I think one of the few silver linings that came out of COVID was a heightened awareness of how important connection is, especially at this age. Every day we see people walking through our doors, sometimes with a bit of a bewildered look on their face, like, okay, I'm here. What am I doing here? But compelled because they know connection is important. They might be feeling lonely, or they might have just moved here. I can't tell you the number of calls we get from sons and daughters who are concerned about their parent. Maybe one spouse has recently passed and the other is spending a lot of time alone, and they're worried for them. So, I think it's also very important to note that we are just in the middle or beginning of a population surge with this demographic. The baby boomers are aging. The oldest baby boomer right now is 79, 80. So this is a time of life where they're not working. So as Indira says, financial considerations are heightened. Maybe their living situation was changed. Maybe their partner has passed away or moved. So there's all kinds of considerations. And because our traditional systems that they have turned to, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's healthcare, whether it's social services, those haven't grown at the same pace as the needs of this population. So they're turning to organizations like the Senior Service Society and mine for that connection and engagement. So we are a volunteer-led organization, and we train our volunteers we have a greeter's desk at the front, and we train those volunteers to recognize that look when someone walks through the door and they're not quite sure what to do, is to welcome them warmly and let them know that they're welcome here. Let's find out what interests you and let's get you connected. So that's very purposeful. And that really is in response to the dangers of social isolation, the dangers of being lonely and on your own. So we do see it, we see it on a daily basis.
I'm going to direct this first to Kate, but I want to open this to both of you to jump in to contribute your thoughts on this. What do you think are blocks to seniors engaging and connecting with others? What is it that might be preventing them? Why are they shunning perhaps activities that might make them connected with others? What's getting in the way? Kate?
I think, as Indira pointed out, there could be financial limitations or mobility issues. You know, we do see a lot of people who will come with a friend. You know, if someone has given up driving or has mobility issues, they'll maybe carpool a little bit. So we do see that. I think there's, you know, there might be just some awkwardness in reaching out, asking for help. You know, maybe a little, maybe someone's a bit shy about doing that. They might not have the social skills to start friendships, new friendships at this stage in life. We know there's a difference between men and women, so that can be a unique challenge unto itself. So again, you know, for organizations like Senior Services and ours and others, senior serving organizations across the province, you know, we purposely try and create programming and services that reduces those barriers so that we can make that engagement as easy as possible.
Indra, is there anything you want to add there in terms of blocks that maybe caregivers or family members should be thinking about? Why isn't my mother, my father, my elderly aunt getting out there and connecting with people?
I think Kate mentioned the most important, or the, I guess, most widely known cause, I guess, of it. The other thing that people don't really, I guess, see is that a lot of seniors have lost, you know, a lot of people, like some people in their lives, and some are close. And this grief has also experienced, or has led for the individual to experience, I don't know, like when people lose something, you know, a little bit of you sort of goes away, and then a little bit at a time, and a little bit at a time. And think about you and your friends and how you hold your friends, you know, for years and years and years, and you've built this relationship, and you've built trust, and you build a community, and then that's gone, right? Like, it's probably, and I know that it is really difficult to start over and make new friends when you're just, you know, just a bit older. Even myself, you know, at 30 years old, I mean, the thought of having to make new friends fills me with like a lot of anxiety. And so I can't imagine having decades and decades of friendships and decades of relationship and family, and having to start over. So I think that is really, and I know that's not the case for, you know, a lot of people, or most of the people, but some people have experienced this grief, and that's a big contributor to them not reaching out, because it is anxiety filling.
I was a caregiver for my very elderly parents for 4 years, for the last years of their lives. And one of the other things that was, they had been very social people, both of them,
Mhm.
all their lives. But in those final years, really, it was me and maybe my brothers that saw them. And that was not just about, you know, they stayed at home, they were in their home. It wasn't only about, gee, they were living in their home and they weren't going out anymore, because I used to try to talk my mother in particular into, we will take you, Mom, to go and see, or Mom, we will make a phone call so you can talk to your friend in Toronto. And the things that I noticed that impacted them, there is that decline in physical well-being.
Mhm.
They feel less confident about leaving home, you know? And, you know, for instance, in the case of my mother, she was very deaf and would not wear a hearing aid, found it alienating to have the hearing aid. She couldn't hear people talking to her, so she wouldn't talk to people. It was really just me because, she wasn't shy to just yell at me if she wanted to tell me something, you know?
Yeah.
But, I had an uncle come by, and my mother was panic stricken
Mm,
because she knew he would be talking to her, and she would not be able to hear him, and she didn't want him to know.
yeah.
Didn't want
Like,
him to know. So these things also, I think caregivers need to look out for. What might be the physical status, the health status conditions that might be causing your parent to behave in a way that wasn't usual for them. Indy, you want to say something?
yeah, I think that, when you mention, your uncle coming in and your mother sort of are panic stricken, that is loneliness, that feeling, right? Of,
Mhm.
I might not be understood, because of I'm not able to hear as good as I used to, I guess, or as well as I used to. And that is, that's part of it. And, the way that seniors are portrayed in media and social media, and how yeah, younger cohorts of people talk about aging folks and people who are seniors are not necessarily the best. Like, it's not, it's not, I think spaces are not very welcoming for seniors in terms of accessibility, number one, and in terms of the attendees of such
Mhm.
events, right? And I think we need to switch that narrative of, like, even though you are older, you are allowed to be in spaces that are intergenerational. You're not behind, you're not lame, you're not, you're not a burden, right, to anyone. So is that fear too of sort of burdening other people, I think.
Mm, mm. Let's dig in a little bit, Indy, into what some of the real health impacts are of loneliness and social isolation. What can that actually mean for people?
Yeah, I mean, you heard a lot about, being lonely is the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And I think in terms of that, like, yes, that's probably true in terms of your psychological implications. And stress does cause a lot of things to your body, right? But not necessarily like, your lung health and stuff like that cigarettes would cause. So it's a good imagery, I want to say, but it's deeper than that, I guess, because when you don't have a circle of people that you depend on, then it snowballs. You're lonely, and then you become lonelier, and you become lonely, and you become lonelier, and
Uh-huh.
then you're just completely isolated. And that's when it's difficult, even for service providers, to find you, to navigate through the system for this, for what already has happened, right? So that snowball effect is really difficult to sort of tackle. And I think that, and Kate can talk more about this too, where what we're trying to do is find seniors who fall between the cracks. Seniors who are needing services but are not reaching out, right? And so as people become more and more isolated and have less and less people in their circle, this is what happens. It's difficult to find you, and it's difficult to ask for help once you're already down. And I think that's the biggest implication, is that snowball effect.
Can online engagement help? I want to get this to both of you, but I'll start with you, Indy. Is that something that caregivers should be thinking about, is how to help their family members or people they love who are elderly to engage online if they are perhaps they've got mobility issues, it's difficult for them to get out?
Oh, absolutely. It's so I want to answer this in two ways. So I think that technology is a good thing for, like, what you mentioned is if they have mobility issues and they are not able to go into, to community organizations and join the clubs, join the activities, then absolutely. So it's better than nothing. And I'm sure Kate can speak more about this too, is that there are online exercises, there's, programs for physical activities, right? That is so much better than not than not doing anything. And while doing these activities, you're also socializing, you're also building connections. However, it is not as ideal as in-person interactions, because
Mm.
you see the person, you see the body language, you see someone's, you know, the way someone moves, and then you connect more, right? That's like the beauty of in-person socialization. So I wouldn't say that it could replace it, but I would say that it is better than not.
Kate, for you, is that part of your programming? Is that part of what
Yeah.
you're considering when you're?
Yeah, a little bit, but I would add to Indira's comments that if there's a senior who may not be that tech savvy, who may not know how to use a computer, they may not have a smartphone or an iPad, that in itself becomes a barrier, right?
Yeah, and it can be
So
a financial barrier. Those are
oh,
not
absolutely.
inexpensive items.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. If it's a lower income senior who cannot afford it, it's not accessible then, right? And it's hard for seniors to learn new technology at this stage in life. Some are very open to it and are willing, and we, like many organizations, we offer tech help support. But for some, they don't want to do it. They might not have grown up with using computers. It might not be familiar to them. Cell phones are designed to fit in your hand. They're smaller, and if you have bad arthritis or if your vision is poor, it becomes so frustrating that you don't want to do it. So there can be a lot of barriers. I think the in-person connection is way more valuable. We have adjusted some of our programs here so that we build in that connection. For example, we offer housekeeping support, and we created a new role within that housekeeping support. We call it enhanced housekeeping. So our housekeeper will go into a senior's home, take care of some light housekeeping for them, but then we'll sit down and spend a half an hour and have a visit, right? So that's the enhanced part, right? Because we recognize that social interaction is so important. And our housekeeper might be the only person that senior talks to that week, right? And so very critical, right, that there is that connection. And like Indy said, people can fall through the cracks, and it's on organizations like ours and senior services to identify those people and make sure they have connection.
Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned we know there are differences between men and women, and I want to dive into that a little bit with you now. Talk to me about what that difference is and how you're addressing that at the Langley Center.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that's inappropriate here, but women are more social, right? And we gather together. We go out for lunch. We might go to the theater. We'll go for dinner. We have friends that we just visit with, and then have a harder time with that. And it's not something that comes naturally to them. And so again, we really watch for that at the center when someone is coming in and they have a bit of a look on their face like, okay, what am I doing here? Is we just try and welcome them in, whether it's a man or a woman. But men in particular, we have a caregiver support group specific for men, because those are unique challenges. We have a number of activities here that aren't maybe specifically for men, but they tend to gravitate. We have an amazing snooker room here, and it's mostly men who access that snooker room. So that would be a bit of an example. We have a wood carvers group here who is predominantly men, and I pop in every once in a while, and there it's a social group, really. I mean, they're all doing something, but it's very much a social group. And I know the Men's Shed is a huge movement worldwide to really address connection for men.
Explain what that is. What's the Men's Shed?
Yeah, so the Men's Shed is a global movement, and you'll see chapters or you'll see groups in communities, and it's kind of self-organized, and it's just an opportunity for men to come together and share experiences. There is kind of a mental health component to it. So, it's really breaking down the barriers for men so they can meet new friends, they can talk about issues that are shared, challenges that they're experiencing. We host the Langley Med Shed here. So I've watched them from their first start to really now growing. So it's great to see. But I think for men in particular, it's hard to reach out for help. and hard to put up your hand to say, I'm struggling or I'm lonely. It's harder for men than I think it is for women.
We've been talking about health effects of this and the impact it can have there. I do want to also touch on some of the effects that might relate to safety and well-being. Indy, I'm wondering, can loneliness lead to the mistreatment of seniors, and how?
Yes. If we can imagine one person who has been lonely for a while, and that snowball effect that I mentioned, it gets worse and worse, and you can't do a lot of things anymore in terms of socializing. There's now, with the digital age, especially if that person uses technology and the internet, there is a lot of how do I say, like, scams, and scams are specifically targeted for seniors, and they know this. Seniors are vulnerable in terms of digital well-being, and these targeting of seniors is very it's on purpose. The loneliness that people experience, and again, this is not just for seniors, but because of the loneliness that people experience, some people are willing to take in any form of social interaction, whether it be real or not, unfortunately. And so there might be some financial implications. You could get doxxed, meaning that your personal information could be taken, and you wouldn't know about it. You would think that someone just tries to reach out to you and have positive intent, I want to say. But that might not necessarily be the case. So I think there's when someone is socially isolated, and this also includes social isolation, or when someone is lonely, you might not know new information that's happening around the world in terms of new scams. Like Kate's organization, for example, has Kate, you'll talk about this. Sorry, but I has scam prevention, workshops, for example. And other organizations have this as well. They have digital literacy workshops, right? How to keep yourself safe, from
And there are
scams.
romance scams, right? I mean, there was some just recently in the newspaper where elderly women got taken for their life savings, basically.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. The first year of me working with seniors, I had someone come in and then they said, I had $100,000 taken from me. Right? It was a dating scam. It was someone who pretended that they were an older man looking for an older woman, wanting to build a life. And her personal information was taken. I'm not saying there are no, hope for romance or anything like that in the digital age for older women and older men. I'm just saying that if you are socially isolated and you're lonely, you might not know the best, how do you say it? Like
you might be especially vulnerable to
exactly
unfortunately, the kinds of very manipulative messages of
correct.
people who have bad intent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These courses and these, when you have a conversation with someone, you might not know the new best practices, right, to keep yourself safe digitally, or not even digitally, just in general. The social cues, how to know if someone's telling the truth or not. These social interactions are important for us to maintain that, right? To know someone's intentions. When you are isolated for so long, you don't know body language like that. You don't know, voices when someone's intentions are not right or not. So.
This has been a really great conversation, full of insight and information. I want to wrap it up by coming to each of you and asking for, your 3 top tips, basically. So if you're talking to seniors or caregivers or family members of seniors, what are the top 3 things that they can do if they think that they themselves or the person they care about is experiencing loneliness? Kate, how about you?
Yeah, well, the first would be just to reach out to community resources, because every community has some kind of resource, whether it's a senior center or uh, 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 even a library. They will be able to help you find connection in their community that's within your age group. The one thing we all have in common is we're all aging. So it's in our collective best interest to make sure that this population is well cared for. Um, you know, uh, uh, as Indy pointed out, there could be scams that are very much targeted to seniors. Who is a very trusting for the most part. And if there's that social isolation or loneliness piece, they're really preyed upon. So I see a bit of a healthy skepticism, but we do a lot of education, and I think that could be the value of organizations like ours. Is there's so many resources. So be brave, take that first step. Put your hand up and say, I think I need a bit of help. So that's really important. Volunteer. That's a great way to meet new friends, to give back to your community, maybe find some purpose if you're missing that in your life. So there's all kinds of organizations that would welcome an older person as a volunteer. So that could be a really good idea. And maybe maybe take your friends and go out and do something. Maybe be that leader to say, why don't we get together for coffee? I haven't seen you in a year or two, to take that first courageous step. Right? It can be hard, but I can guarantee it's always worth it.
Okay, and Indy, I want to come to you and particularly advice maybe for caregivers and family members. What are some things that they can do if they think someone they care about is experiencing loneliness?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that the first thing that a family member or caregiver or friends could do is identify their needs. So identify the senior's needs. Like we mentioned earlier, some people choose to be isolated, right? But how do we make that safe? Like, how do we make sure that you have someone in case of an emergency? And it's okay to be isolated, We want, again, to give agency back to people's lives. So understanding their needs, what is the cause of the isolation or the loneliness? Is it, language barriers? Is it financial barriers? Is it transportation? Is it, note down these, I guess, want to say causes of the isolation itself, and do sort of like specific reach outs based on these issues that the senior is experiencing. There are so many programs across our province, right? Like, for example, if they are experiencing transportation barriers and they want to be involved, they just can't get there, then maybe it's a very specific reach out for like a transportation organization where they can provide that specific service. The second thing is to involve them in the planning. So, tell them every step of the things that you're doing. Oh, I'm reaching out to this because you said that you weren't able to drive there, right? So, I heard this program has a bus or has like a taxi service that's subsidized, making sure that they are involved in their own advocacy, I guess I want to say, is very important. That really makes someone feel not lonely, they're involved in this. No one's coming into them and saying, like, you're doing this. No one wants that happening, especially if you've been isolated for so long, you don't want your life to be dictated by someone else. And the last is just be there for them. You're clearly, in touch with this person that you think could be lonely. You might be that only person's contact, right? Like you said, Carolyn, with your mother, your uncle might be coming, and that's family, but it might not be as familiar, right? So you know that they are safe with you. Then listen to them, be there for them, and then, like I said, mention everything, involve them in their own advocacy. The biggest thing.
This has been a great conversation. I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people. I want to thank both of you, Kate and Indy. Thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who are listening and watching, SSSBC always adds lots of resources and links to these podcasts. You've heard Kate and Indira talk about some of the ideas and things that might be helpful for you or for someone that you love who is a senior. Please check out the links and resources that will be available with the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
and
you.
We'll see you next time.